Hello, and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and we are together exploring what may be the greatest hero story ever told. And we've been discovering that in order to read it, we have to match that hero's level of seeing ourselves. For us to be able to judge whether or not it was a success, whether or not Socrates is the greatest action hero, we have to participate, we have to play our part, we have to engage in the dialectic with Socrates through time in this magical way, and see if we can ourselves learn this great art. Without that, we're not able to judge whether or not he is successful, because the standard is not just for him to function as this superhero-like character, but for him to be able to pass it on. Pass on his power, pass on the quirk, pass on the art of the logos, he's calling it. And if he can't, well, both for where he's going and for us here, we won't have what we need to solve problems and reach our destiny, escape the chains of fate, and reach our highest goals. So that's exciting. And of course, we've been talking about the fact that this kind of way of reading the Phaedo hasn't been possible up until now. And the reason being, the text is written in a certain kind of way where it's not obvious, but the questions are hidden. In the words themselves, they hide questions. They challenge us to participate. They give us what we need to play along to. But if we don't have the words, we're not going to be able to play. We're going to miss the puzzles. So only in the last 5 or so years, we have had a translation that includes the Greek and includes the certain key words. The translator that we're reading is Juan Balboa, and he uses colors and highlighters and capital letters to point out the key words we should pay attention to. He keeps the Greek in many instances, which is important, because we don't have an English translation of certain key words. We don't have a word for nous. We don't have a word for dianoia, a word for ousia. So if these are key words, and they absolutely are, we need to see them in Greek. We've been talking about how language shapes your vision. So the philosophy that we're learning here is a single philosophy. Which you could say it's the philosophy. Whereas the philosophy we learn nowadays is not this. It's the opposite. It's a philosophy. Well, we consider philosophy to be many. A philosophy, Kant's philosophy, Hegel's philosophy, crazy Aunt Jill's personal philosophy, and so on. That's not philosophy. Socrates is specifically saying, no, that's love of the body, the love of arguing, and in another text he calls it love of opinions. So we're discovering there is a single philosophy, which of course makes sense if there's truth. The implication of there being many philosophies is there isn't a sound, stable, knowable truth, and there isn't a sound, stable, understanding that we could all share in. There is no reality, there is no logos. And of course, that's the spirituality, and that's the zeitgeist, that's the way of thinking of our current society. And Socrates is pointing out, hey, this is the greatest defect of the soul. This is what we have to be on our guard against. And this is our culture. So we've got some work to do if we are to overcome the greatest defect within ourselves. And secondarily, in humanity, Socrates is making it clear this is for you. be greedy for the logos, which is funny because we talk about the virtues. As we learn philosophy, the single philosophy, and therefore that which can unify ourselves, so we're not all doubting ourselves or scattered, but also unify humanity. It's not my opinion versus the next country's opinion or the next religion's opinion or the next guy on my street's opinion. It's open to all who want to play in the game. What makes us different would be how much we're sharing in the logos, how much we're sharing in truth and understanding, which is a big deal. But Socrates is saying, hey, well, as we learn that, we have to put it into action. So as we learn the dialectic, we can recognize understanding as a kind of definition. Demonstration is putting it into our experience. Can we do it? As Socrates says, walk and talk this way. We might say walk the walk and talk the talk. And the doing of that, we call the virtues. So we're talking about the soul in the Phaedo. What is the soul if it's immortal? And what's the significance of our learning or our nurturing of the soul in this lifetime for how we live, but also how we die and where we go when we die. So we're talking about the soul. So the walking of the walk. So if there are three parts of the soul, so we need an understanding of the soul to be talking about something. So we define the soul as the unity or the way of bringing together the aspects or the functions or the forces within ourselves. We have an inward desiring aspect. We want to eat sandwiches. We want to look after ourselves. We desire pleasures and desire to avoid pains. We have an outward moving part of the soul. There's a part of us that wants us to act in the world, to do things, to achieve things, to engage in activities. And there's a reasoning part of our soul. We could represent them as belly, heart, and head. That's the Taoist way of doing it. We can see ourselves as a snowman because the biggest part, most powerful, is our desires. The next is our outward moving, that which seeks honor or fame in our outward activities. And the smallest part is the reasoning part. So if we put into action that which we are learning about philosophy, this true universal understanding, the logos, and there being a true, good, unknowable reality beyond the physical world, reality being or nous, knowledge, then we have to not just learn about it, but implement it, make it our own. That's the virtue. So therefore, taking the lowest part, we should desire it. Courage, how we act, we should act towards it. We should seek it and hold on to it as the truth, even if during all of our activities there are ups and downs that we experience as we act in the world, but they shouldn't dictate to us what is true. Audience locked. We shouldn't appeal to what the crowd, the many, happen to want today. We should hold on to the truth that we gain through the logos about being. That's courage in our activities. And for the third part of the soul, that's the virtue of wisdom, to use what we're learning in our thinking and planning. Of course, when you recognize that this is, if there is a truth, a single philosophy, then you would recognize, oh, hang on a second. If there is a single truth in philosophy and therefore a single destiny that this brings us, that philosophy brings us to, then this is our proper function. This is desiring the right thing, kind of the way that we are made. This is acting in the right way. This is using the right paradigm for planning. The word for that, doing your intended function at all times, That's justice. So justice is a kind of the fourth virtue that sits above the triad of the soul's virtues. It applies to all of them individually, and as a whole. If you were to do your intended function, you'd be doing those three. So it's the justice as a whole that results from the virtues. So that's a little refresher of the virtues. And of course, we're going to go into the Republic soon, and maybe after the Phaedo, so we can nail it down for ourselves. This is just a belief at the moment. We need to see it in the text, put it into a dialectic, make it our own, which is the spiritual yoga or the exercise of philosophy. Dianoia, the gateway to nous, to knowledge. And if we are practicing the virtues at all times, that insight, that dianoia and nous can upgrade our virtues that we do by practice and habit and discipline, upgrade into a kind of immortal virtue, one that we don't have to sort of put in through discipline. It's ours now, and it won't lose its power so long as we stay there. Kind of learning that will transcend this lifetime, and therefore the word paideia fits. Paideia, the spiritual learning that we're here for. Which is great, which is fantastic. And of course, if you've tasted ultimate beauty, it's not hard to want to desire it. Just as we go through philosophy, the more we learn about dianoia understanding, the less we're interested in gossip or other activities other than philosophy. So while it starts as a practice or habit, the more we integrate it and the more we see in this game, the easier it becomes until it's so obvious that we can't act otherwise. Justice, we were naturally doing our intended function. And of course, people call that the flow state. So there are levels of excellences that come, natural, automatic, acting in the most proper way for the situation without having to do it through discipline, certain ideals, being in the zone, someone might call it. The ideal of the samurai is described as to act without thinking or planning, most appropriate for the situation with the full force of your being. Well, if you're unified, you've got the full force of your being. When you're not fighting against the other desires, or the other fears in courage, or the other ways of thinking or opinions in wisdom or reasoning, if you're not fighting against those, then you would have freedom, you'd have the full force of your being. And if you're tuned into the logos, as Socrates is saying, it's not coming from you, as it's not coming from Socrates, then the patterns would unfold on their own. So there's an effortless quality to it. The metaphor that's given sometimes is a master butcher doesn't have to sharpen his knife, because a master butcher can see the patterns in the meat, can see the sinews in the beef that he's cutting. And if you cut along those lines, it's effortless. Kind of like there's an anime Demon Slayer, and you can see the threads. He follows them, and it's going to work. That kind of flow state. Now, as we read, we're seeing what it's like. How does Socrates look, and how does he respond to the logos? Because he's in this state. He's saying, I've completed my work. All these things I'm describing, I'm there. I have been initiated in this way. Which is interesting because not only are we learning it and doing it ourselves, we need to have a way of judging. Judging is part of this game. How do we know we're there? How do we recognize a flow state? This is the importance of the logos. There are some spiritual traditions that lack a logos. And you might miss certain states of mind because it's not understood. We've been talking about the importance of language. If you don't have a language to recognize certain things, you'll miss it. Or you won't value it. Or you won't know how to nurture it. Or you won't know how to go into it deeper. All of these things fall away. You miss them. That's why we have to use Greek words sometimes and introduce them into our language. And that's something that we do. We talk about croissants. That's not an English word. We talk about Schadenfreude, German word, to take pleasure in another's misfortune. So why not ousia? Why not dianoia and nous? We need to reintroduce it into our language. So we're integrating what we learn within into our virtues as we go. So if we're doing that, we are ourselves playing the game. We're reading with a level of integrity that will allow us to match Socrates, so that we can judge whether or not he succeeds in being a hero and passing on his hero ability to us. That's exciting. So this is the exciting way of reading that we're discovering. Oh, and we're also recognizing that this possibility to become a great hero in this kind of a way, and for Socrates to become a great hero too, because if the criteria is to not only be it, but pass it on, using the new language, the dialectic, which is what we want to do because it's the method, it's the practice, it's the yoga. The dialectic, we could say, he has to define it, understand it, talk about it, demonstrate it. He has to talk the talk and walk the walk. He has to function as a great hero in this dialogue. As he said, vanquish the logos of Simius and Cebes that is against the immortality of the soul that could lead to us fearing death. But also division and synthesis analysis. Divide that up into a certain way that we can exercise our own dianoia, our own logos and dialectic, so that we can pick it up ourselves. We don't just trust him. That's the danger. Any traditions that are based on trust or belief, they're dangerous because they're going to let you down. And if you keep getting let down, you'll end up hating humans or thinking that there is no reasoning, there is no logos, or reality is bad or not knowable. So this is the danger of trust. And of course we recognize that in our culture. Hope and change. Politicians are all about hope. Well, you wouldn't allow that in medicine. Hope that I'm actually a surgeon. No. Understand and experience, please. We have to go beyond belief. In fact, we've already seen in the text that which we experience as pure and real is unopinable. It's out of opinion. It's not an object of opinion because it's not seen through our senses. It's not part of that shadow of the logos that plays out in the physical world, the back and forth of opposites. And of course, if we recognize that kind of physical shadow of the logos, if that's all we know, then we can think, well, that's just the way it is. So, war, me against you. Conflict, battles, competition, capitalism, these can all be justified as natural. Of course, it's not. It's the decay or the shadow of the true logos that plays out in physical things, but we're not just physical. We have consciousness, we have soul. All physical things seek being, says Socrates, and are here to remind us to seek being ourselves. So this back and forth opposites kind of shadow of logos that's, hey, therefore, survival of the fittest. No. That's there to remind us to seek what it's a shadow of. Just like beautiful things are here to remind us to seek beauty itself. Just like particular philosophies, a philosophy, and many A's are here to point to the philosophy. We're missing the mark, missing the point. Yeah, just because something exists doesn't mean it's good. But if you look at their purpose And if you look at the cause and if you look at the paradigm, then you can see that there is a kind of justice. Yeah, the back and forth of opposites and competition or growth and decay, that might seem unjust or harmful. Of course, that is harmful. That's why capitalism is so terrible. Competition somehow being good for all. No. One person wins at the expense of everyone else losing. It's freaking terrible. So it seems unjust. But if you realize that it's just a part of a greater whole, this is a kind of physical logos that's a shadow of the true logos and will always fall short in its nature, according to the text that we're reading, but seeks it and points to it, then we can see, there's a purpose to competition. Not to embrace competition, but to seek that which it is yearning for. Unity, togetherness, understanding and knowledge, truth, our destiny. And think about it. Think about the competitions that you like. What do you like about it? Do you like that a team cries or loses? Or do you like the togetherness that happens within the winning team? Do you like it when there's a justice? They win because they've deserved it. The best team won on the day. Yeah, it's a very limited. There's only a togetherness or unity within the winning team, not within the league, not within the losing teams. There's only a success within the winning team. And their success is defined by the failure of everybody else. Relative. It's relative to the success is defined relative to the failure of others. So it's very limited and inadequate, whereas the success of being is not defined upon the failure of everyone else. In fact, the more people who can become philosophers, who can realize there is an understandable logos and a knowable reality, the more people in that game balloons, the more we all win. Success is defined on its own grounds. So Socrates passed this on, but very shortly after, the Greek tradition that had these key words, particularly the word the, and the word altos, and the word ousia and dianoia, that was a whole list we've been learning, wiped out by the Romans and the Catholic Church, Second Reich, First Reich, in that tradition of oppression. And they didn't have these words. In fact, they didn't have a word for the. So automatically philosophy wiped out. But thankfully, we're at a stage of learning where people have recognized this. And we're in a state of technology where we can share these ideas on the internet. And we have a translation thanks to Juan Balboa, which has those key words, sometimes includes the Greek. But even if it doesn't, like the word mindfulness doesn't have the word phronesis, because he's also writing for a mainstream audience who might not realize philosophy is a quest, like a game that you play. You have to match it, you have to play it, you have to look for puzzles. It's not just reading a Harry Potter book. It's not like reading Kant's philosophy or Hegel's philosophy. It's very, very different. It's to engage you because you need to learn the art too. Most people don't realize that yet. So he's also writing for a mainstream audience. So he'll put in mindfulness because phronesis is too far out of our lexicon. But he'll include the Greek underneath and he'll put it in purple so that we can play the game. And this kind of translation has only been around, I think, in the last 5 years or so. So we have what we need to save ourselves and purify ourselves, save humanity and evolve humanity. To become the ideal heroes by learning the art of the logos. And if we do so, if we can match Socrates in that kind of way, we also make him the ideal hero, because his standard is to define, demonstrate, talk the talk and walk the walk, but also divide it up into its key terms, its puzzles, so that we have something to exercise ourselves on, puzzles to solve, so that we can synthesize and analyze it, make it our own. And of course, the way we do it might be a little bit different to his, because we might see a little bit more. We might have had different experiences. We might benefit by maybe we're learning about dream analysis that isn't mentioned in the text, referred to, but not explicitly. I mean, it is explicitly referred to in the Phaedo, but we might have seen more in it. And so therefore, when we do that final stage, synthesis, we unify our own activity, make it ours, and then also relate our new seeing back to the origin. That's the analysis part. And we see the power in a new way. So we're adding to the quirk. Quirk, another name for like superpower. Passing it on in a way that it can be added to. That must be the ideal hero. Because if you take away any one of those steps, then somebody could come along and say, oh, that's nice, but it's not the ideal because I can add one of these steps in. Someone who can define being a hero, but can't do it. Well, I can imagine a hero who can do it. That's better. Or like a Superman, he can do it, but he doesn't understand what he's doing. Well, Superman who has an understanding of justice. Imagine that. It's not, I'm the just person because I have the power to beat you up. No. I understand the nature of justice. And maybe if it's the art of the logos, I can use that to make you better. So definition and demonstration. But also you could say, well, if a hero could pass it on after his death, isn't that a little bit more ideal? Of course. Someone can, well, all right, fair enough. Someone else comes along and says, well, what about if they pass it on in a way that you can improve on it? So it's not stagnant. It's not conservative. It's not traditional. It's not maintaining the tradition like many, many spiritual traditions or even philosophical traditions. They don't like it when people add to it. They get confused. What if it's corrupting it? Yeah, what if it is? Because you don't have a way of judging whether or not it's corrupting or if it's benefiting. That's why conservative opinions or philosophy or politics appeals to people who lack the ability to think for themselves. Often because those conservatives remove education or are part of this Latin, modern European tradition, which is against thinking for ourselves. It's belief-based, it's opinion-based. So the least educated are often find it appealing to nostalgia. Remember when it was good? So all of the American presidents, the Republican Party talk about, use the same catchphrase, make America great again. The Bushes used it, Reagan used it, Trump uses it. It's the same bullshit. It's recycled bullshit. Because when we don't have the ability to think for ourselves, we can be manipulated. Ironically, that's what's happening. They are being manipulated to act against their best interest. But Socrates saw this 2,000 years ago. The very thing you can identify as causal to our problems in our world. Being unable to think and judge for ourselves and having to believe authorities and being continually scammed by them. And being afraid of change as part of the scam, playing into fear of difference, fear of the immigrants, fear of evolution, fear of new technology. Preying on that to manipulate them, when ironically that fear is, I fear change because this new thing could manipulate me. That's the irony. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Conservatism, out of fear of change because that change might be bad or manipulative, preying on that to be bad and manipulative. So what's causing that? Why is that where we're at? Socrates identified this all the way back then. Isn't that amazing? What kind of seeing must he have to identify that even back then? Isn't that amazing? He just sees it that way. The problem we're facing now, he saw. And he said, by the way, humanity, sure, but we're also interested in our soul. And he said, be greedy for the logos. The helping others, being the benefit to humanity is secondary. It will automatically be beneficial. Because if it's true, it will be persuasive in a beautiful way of its nature. These are his words, Socrates' words. And he said, I want to know the truth for me. See how greedy I am for the logos? So that's what we want to do. If we want to match him, we've got to recognize the benefit to others or to the world is secondary to our own soul's benefit. Be greedy for the logos. Not selfish, because selfish indicates a badness. It can't be. If this is the most good thing to do, you can't vilify it. That's bullshit slave language. Cinderella has to be selfless, sacrifice herself for the king or for her evil stepmother. But no. The best thing you can do is be selfish for the self logos, for self being, and for the one self. The three excellences. Isn't that exciting? We're in a rare, privileged point in history where we have what we need to wake up or reawaken philosophy and become the ideal hero for ourselves. Learn what we need to judge so we're not conservative like those who are manipulated, or even spiritual traditions who we stick closely to the way it was written 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Religions, the text says so, it can't be wrong. Or Eastern traditions, no, we always do it this way, we don't change. Well, we can identify why they don't change, because Socrates pointed it out. Because they lack the art of the logos. By the way, they need to change. Because ain't no one got it completely perfect. Especially if they lack the logos. Obviously, they're missing something very, very important. And it will cause them the greatest defect in their soul. They'll be let down, so they'll end up riling against the people who passed on these old teachings. So we have a lot of atheists or people who are anti-spiritual because they realized that they spent their life believing these people, and then they found out that they have problems, because everybody has a level that they're at and also a level of their problem. That's the right angle of the ladder and its shadow. So they might end up hating all humans, or more importantly, thinking there is no understanding. Because look at, even this guru got it wrong. Even this enlightened mystic has a problem. Yeah, no joke. They all do. By definition, because without the art of the logos, you don't have what you need to understand, recognize, address, and remove problems. Free yourself from your shackles. Because understanding this requires understanding where it's from. The shadow, you need to understand the ladder. That's part of the art of the logos. That's why, famously, the enlightened gurus in literature or in culture are depicted as being drunks, the drunken master, or having sexual problems, the pervy sage. Very standard. If you've ever watched an anime, lots of pervy sages teaching the hero. And we're understanding why. And this is why, one of the reasons why I love philosophy so much is it's so simple. Once you see it, it's so simple. Because what's the reason why you get let down and you end up hating people? Or the reason why you get conned by a con artist appealing to conservative or nostalgia or the way it was? What's the reason why you get tricked by people who think that they're wise and smart because they just contradict the logos? That's what makes them so clever. What's the reason why we can't change? What's the reason why you have pervy sages or drunken masters? The answer to all of those questions is the same thing. The art of the logos. The art of the logos gives us what we need to solve problems, even if we have enlightenment experiences and are gurus. The art of the logos allows us to judge new information and go, oh yeah, we should add this to my tradition. The art of the logos means you're not find it attractive, nostalgia, or make America great again, or hope and change. Because you have the art of the logos, you can, let's improve, let's make things better. Of course we weren't good back then. That's bullshit. And we have what we need to not be conned, the art of the logos. Socrates is pointing this out for us. 2,000 years ago he saw it. Isn't that amazing? Almost 2,500 years ago. So we have to trust the logos, but there has to be reasons for us to trust the logos. He's already pointed to understanding for ourselves and experiencing it for ourselves, dianoia and nous, but he's saying there has to be an art too. And by the way, those that will con you out of philosophy, often claiming to be philosophers themselves, taking you from the philosophy to the many opinions, and particularly theirs, is they will say three things we got in the text. There is no reality, or it's not sound, good and knowable, stable, universal. There is no logos that is understandable, running through everything, and there is no techne, skill, pattern that uses those things. Techne is kind of a skill, or rules that allow it to be a skill. There is no reality, there is no logos, and there is no skillful use of the logos. So, if those are three things that Socrates says that the people who con us into the greatest defect of the soul, those are three things that they say that is wrong, then we have to play. We have to respond. He is giving us this in the division stage. We have to play. We have to take those negatives and flip them around. What would the positive be? Solve the puzzle. So maybe the art of the logos necessarily requires those three things, because the cause of the greatest defect of the soul is the absence of the art of the logos. All of those things we've talked about today. Now, why do I change colors? Maybe it's my changing lights behind me. Sometimes I look a bit pale. So, those three things might be tied to the art of the logos. That's a good puzzle to have. Hypothesis, maybe. Question, definitely. And that's what we do. We carry questions. That's to be on a quest. So, with those stakes in mind, the highest stakes, with that cliffhanger and on that bombshell, let's jump into the text and see what happens. Let's see if he bees a hero. Not like a bee that leaves behind a sting, but he bees a hero that leaves behind the best thing. Let's see if we can match him and pick up the tradition ourselves. For our own, in a greedy way. For our own benefit, for our own better understanding and seeing, for our own better experience, feelings, states of mind, for our own better functioning in the world, both in this life and the next. Notice those three things: states of mind, to do with being or reality; understanding and seeing, logos; functioning, techne. Those are the three things that the con artists tell us you don't exist. But those are the three things we want. Isn't that fascinating? The people in our society who claim to be wise, claim to be clever, claim to be life coaches or philosophers or, life gurus, all that kind of crap. Very, very popular. They get 1 million views in every one of their YouTube videos. They claim that the 3 things we all want and need are not real. They contradict reality, but it appears to be wise. Isn't that interesting? And would cause the greatest defect. So if there's the logos and its shadow, there has to be some reason why these people are believable. And what do? They contradict the logos. They contradict the 3 things we need. Isn't that interesting? It's the exact opposite of the true hero and reality that says there are those 3 things. There is a reality, and which is your own mind. So there is an ideal state of feeling or consciousness. That's real, reality itself. There is an understanding allowing you to see and function better and better in the world, including understanding that state of mind, the logos. And there is a skillful functioning with it, techne, a paradigm and functioning with it, which we're seeing as the dialectic, by the way, possibly. Isn't it interesting? We are living in a reflection of reality in this 3D world. Just like if you look in a reflection of yourself in the mirror, you hold up your left hand, the mirror reflection holds up his right hand. It's the opposite of what's real. So you could see with this physical world and the way it's organized, those that claim to be most wise and understanding reject the conditions for wisdom understanding. Those who claim to have the skill or the art of philosophy reject the techne of the logos, reject what is needed to have that. It's the exact opposite. And Socrates, who is a philosopher, who has been initiated and completed his work, practiced philosophy in the right way, is saying the exact opposite. It's left and right. And of course, there are other qualities that make this reality like a mirror reflection of truth. You look at your mirror reflection, doesn't have consciousness, doesn't have will, doesn't have freedom. Your mirror reflection has to do what you say, or do what you do. Doesn't have understanding and nous. Or, interesting, the people who are in charge in our world, are they free or are they bound by their fate, bound by their problems, lack freedom to reach their destiny? Do they have understanding? No, they're rejecting understanding. Do they have nous? They reject knowledge. Just like a mirror reflection, the highest aspects of us is missing in the mirror, and various things are reflected in an opposite way, just like this 3D world. The highest aspects that you should have in leaders, in people in authority, in teachers, are absent. And the opposite. You hold up left, it holds up right. They should be teaching the logos being and the techne of the logos. 3 aspects of the art of the logos. And they don't. They tell you it's not even possible. It doesn't exist. Isn't that curious? Well, it is fascinating, but we don't have to fall into that trap. Thanks to where we happen to be born. So there's something that we must have done in our previous lives that brings us here to this moment. If you're watching this, if you're interested enough in this to listen this far into this podcast, then you must have done something in the previous life that has chosen this point of time. This point of time where we are in a unique position where we have what we need to awaken the logos, awaken the art of the logos, save and perfect, purify and perfect ourselves, and possibly secondarily humanity. Isn't that interesting? I wonder why. I wonder what you did in your previous life to be in this moment. And all that has led up to this moment can be seen as kind of needed or a kind of justice that might have been hard to see at the time, but may have been setting the conditions for this. Playing this game. Isn't that cool? Good for you. On that note, let's jump into the text. Okay, the conclusion that Simmias had. So Socrates said, by the way, if you think the soul is harmony, the first to go, then you can't also think that learning is remembering. So, using modern language, if you think consciousness is a byproduct of our physical body, we're just a byproduct of neurons firing and chemicaling in our brain, then you have to reject the idea of learning as remembering. Because that means the soul couldn't have existed before your physical form to have the chemicals and the neurons. Therefore, it couldn't have known self-ousia, which contains the ideas that we never see in our world, but we relate to and we use for thinking. Beauty, justice, goodness, equality, greater and lesser, same and different. All of these things that we seek, that we use to think, that we see even though we don't see them physically. So you have to pick one or the other. We're either the soul is like harmony or learning is remembering. Simmias concludes, I prefer, the logos are about harmony. Right, so which one do you pick? And I pick the former, Socrates. Learning as remembering. Right, so Socrates asked which of those two? Is the soul like harmony and will be gone when our body dies? Or is learning remembering? Simmias says, I prefer the former. Learning as remembering, Socrates. For on the one hand, the later one came to me without demonstration. Yeah, the idea that our soul is just chemicals and when we die it doesn't have an existence outside of our death. That feels true. It's kind of part of our culture. But it has never been demonstrated to us. No one's ever shown that properly. It's just a theory that's kind of common. Whereas logos as learning as remembering was shown with demonstration. We had reasons to believe it. We followed it through understanding and the dialectic. So the soul as harmony came to me without demonstration, but with a certain probability, right? Like modern science. And attractiveness, right? Like beliefs and prejudices. Which is why most humans believe it, even today. But on the other hand, I am aware the logos upon which the proof is based on probability are false pretensions. We don't learn through the logos the art of the logos based on probability. And if one does not guard against this, they will most certainly be deceived, even in geometry, even in the sciences, and in everything else. Whereas the logos of recollection and learning is delivered by a hypothesis worthy of acceptance. For in this way, our soul was also said to exist somewhere before she came into the body. Wow, isn't that interesting?
Wow.
Just as self-ousia.
Wow.
Right? Self-ousia exists before we were born. Self-ousia, just to remind us, is the apex, or that the wholeness of all of the ideas in being. Now, one of the reasons why it's not as attractive is up until now we haven't been using the word idea, which is a Greek word, which means to behold. People who teach philosophy teach it as the forms, which is bullshit. It's not a form. It's not a form. There have been many betrayals against the logos, against Socrates in our culture, One of them is translating idea as form. So, those ideas or aspects of that beholding as a whole is self-ousia, which is interesting because the word self is there, which means it's the highest. It also means it's very tied to you, the self. Also, ousia is the eye of the mind. And if we're seeking a certain state of self called phronesis, earlier Socrates tied phronesis with ousia, phronetiousia. Phronesis tied to ousia. So that existed before we were born, and that must be what we experienced or were joined with before we came into the body for us to learn. And he calls back the argument, that which we call the name or stamp the seal, that which absolutely is. Everything that we say exists in self-ousia. And if that's what we remember when we learn, our soul has to exist before we were born. Thus I persuade myself and I accept this logos in a sufficient and correct way. Sufficient and correct. Necessarily then, by these reasons, it is proper neither that I accept the theory from myself or be conned by anyone else that the soul is harmony. Okay, that's where we're at. Now, because these arguments are worded in a tricky way, I think the best way of going is to read it in the Loeb, which is sort of a more fluent reading, and then reread it in the Balboa, which is a more accurate reading to the Greek, because we need the accuracy to pick up the key terms, but it can be confusing unless we know the general flow of it first. So that's what we're going to do. Let's bring up the Loeb. We are on 93A. Here we go. Isn't technology great? 93A. When used to pursue the art of the logos, by the way, not when used to make nuclear bombs and mousetraps. Which is a saying somebody used to say. Okay, what was it again? 93A. Here we go. Which do you prefer, that knowledge is recollection or that soul is harmony? The former, decidedly, Socrates. For this came to me without demonstration. It merely seemed probable and attractive. Seems. Which is the main reason many men hold it. I am conscious that those arguments which base their demonstrations on mere probability are deceptive, and if we are not on our guard against them, they deceive us greatly, in geometry and in all other things. But the theory of recollection and knowledge has been established by a sound course of argument. For we agreed that our soul, before it entered into the body, existed just as the very essence which is called that which absolutely exists. Now, this is why we read both. We see the callback to the earlier argument, stamp the seal that which absolutely exists. We see self-ousia instead of very essence. But this kind of reads it a bit like in a more flowy way. Now I am persuaded that I have accepted this essence on sufficient and right grounds. Self-ousia. I cannot therefore accept from myself or anyone else the statement that soul is harmony. Good for him. There is another way of looking at it, Simius. Do you think a harmony or any other composite thing can be in any other state than that in which the elements of which it is composed? Still a bit complicated, but let's keep reading. Certainly not. Then it can neither do nor suffer anything other than they do or suffer. Ah, that's interesting. You can either do or suffer. Now, is the word suffer? Right, so the word suffer means to be acted upon. So what he's saying, that's like, this is the Old English. So in the Balboa translation, it's she can truly act on anything or be acted on by anything. That's what he means by suffer. Like have things done to you. So with that in mind, if you're based on the parts, the composite parts, you can neither do nor have or experience anything other than they do or experience. Act or be acted on. Then a harmony cannot be expected to lead the elements of which it is composed, but follow them. He agreed, he assented. A harmony then is quite unable to move or make a sound or do anything else that is opposed to its composite parts. Quite unable, said he. Well then, is not every harmony by nature a harmony accordingly as it is harmonized? Is every harmony by nature a harmony accordingly as it is harmonized? What? I do not understand. Thank you. Because I don't understand either. But notice, we can see the pattern. We're learning how, not just what he's saying, but how he's saying it, because we want the art of the logos too. We want to be the ideal for ourselves. So he can start with this. A harmony is quite unable to move or make a sound. Every harmony by nature a harmony accordingly as it is harmonized. To him, this might be obvious. So we can just say this as a definition. And then continue from there. But if the other person doesn't understand, it needs to be phrased in a question, in parts, so that the person can say whether or not they follow. And if he doesn't follow, then he has to go from a definition to demonstrate it. This is the dialectic in action, part of the art of the logos. Because he's not trying to make Simius feel stupid or convince the many by owning him in a debate. He wants to bring him along. I do not understand. Well, let me break it down for you. Would it not, said Socrates, be more completely a harmony and a greater harmony if it were harmonized more fully and to a greater extent, assuming that to be possible and less completely a harmony and a lesser harmony if less harmonized and to a less extent. What's he doing? Greater and lesser. We know these two terms. These are two sulfur terms. These are two terms that are aspects of ousia. Greater and lesser. A greater harmony if it was harmonized more fully to a greater extent, if it was possible, and a lesser harmony if it was harmonized in a lesser way. Certainly. Is this true of the soul? If one soul, even in the slightest degree, more completely and to a greater extent a soul than another, or less completely and to a lesser extent. Not in the least, said he. So you can have a greater or lesser harmony, I guess depending on the skill of the musician, but you can't have a greater or lesser soul. You're just a soul or you're not. Not in the least. Well now, will those who assume that the soul is a harmony say that these things, the virtue and wickedness in the soul are? What will those who assume the soul is a harmony say that these things are? Okay, so what will they say that virtue and wickedness or vice? Let's see if it's vice. Let's check the other text. Let's bring it up. Is the soul more or less a soul? In no way. Come along then, by Zeus. On one hand, the soul is said to possess intellect and virtue and to be good. Wow, we really missed a lot in our past translations, really highlighting the significance of being here now as a philosopher. The soul possesses intellect, and the word is nous. The cognitive function that can apprehend being is highlighted. And virtue. Woof. That's been the whole thing. What do we want as philosophers? Two things he's been saying all the way along. Nous of reality and phronesis, that for which we develop the other virtues. And to be good. So there's a goodness of the soul. But on the other hand, another soul is said to be unenlightened. Oh. And wicked and vicious. Interesting. So, we can see the word vicious is the word bad. Within the context, it would make sense. But a kakon is bad, opposite of good. So wicked is the word that's being translated as the opposite of virtue. We might call it vice. And unenlightened is the opposite of intellect. And that helps us because while we're seeing that we want being, Socrates did point out, by the way, there is a kind of initiation, a spiritual initiation, just as is normally talked about in mystical or spiritual traditions. What we would call enlightenment. So, we have a clearer understanding by having these words that weren't in the past translations.
Wow.
Of what enlightenment is. It's kind of a word that's thrown around nowadays that isn't really nailed down in true understanding. But we can have it. Because we're in this game, because we're reading the text, and because we're reading the text with a level of integrity that matches Socrates, or doing our best to do that. So, what is enlightenment? It's something tied to nous. Kind of makes sense. If this is the cognitive function, the ability we have to apprehend reality itself, wouldn't we say that's enlightenment? Isn't people who have enlightenment experiences in spiritual traditions, do they describe it in a similar way we talk about being? Do they call it bliss? Do they call it beauty itself? Do they call it perfectly the way everything should be, justice? Do they say, oh, I recognized myself, it was pure mind, it was that which absolutely is? Yeah. Different traditions lean on different terms, but That's the significance of philosophy. This is why, one reason why Socrates is calling this the actual true mystical tradition. So we have all of them. So whatever somebody talks about, we can, oh, that's one of the ideas. It's one of the aspects of being. This is the significance of having understanding, definition as well as demonstration, experiencing it and going through understanding to purify, going through dianoia to have that experience. So, enlightenment is tied to thumbs up, nous. Good for us, good news for us. Right, let's try. Maybe that's a little bit better. So those are the oh wait, are these statements made in a true way? So if Socrates wants to pass on the logos, there's a significance for him not just pointing out these key words, two sets of triads, nous, virtue and good. So we would have to do some work maybe, and how would we arrange that as a triad? Let's do it. What do you think? He's giving us three terms and we know we have to look for triads. What would we say? Could we say maybe... Well, good is a key term, so let's say good at the top. Because we want the good, we seek the good self. Activity, so let's use our triad of being or ruling. Let's write that better. Ruling, and power and activity. Let's use this as our framework. Just like we have in philosophy, we have the highest term is Hermes, which is dialectic, and Aphrodite represents the inspiration we get when we have insights, when we see it beautifully come together for us. And we have to be reading a text and matching the level of philosophy, understanding of the author. That's Apollo. Which is why this channel, we read the text as we talk, as we share, as we explore. And of course, this text, Phaedo, is all about being in service to Apollo, the god of purification that was mentioned at the start. So, what would we say? Let's make this purple. Good maybe is the ruling term, I would guess. The power, what's the power? Maybe nous? That's a kind of power. It makes our virtues, and virtue is an activity. We've been talking about that today. We have to be walking the walk. Virtues. Now, as Apollo, which starts as reading, as we start to gain insights, as we apply it to our life, we start to see how everything fits together, how there is a wholeness to reality that can be solved. We are in a solvable game, and every time we have new insights, we level up. It's significant to us. There's a beauty in it, and it inspires us to keep coming back, to keep watching this channel. That's Apollo leveling up. Our philosophy levels up. Our reading levels up. It becomes alive for us. It becomes inspiring for us. It's not a dry, dead thing like at college, people who claim to be philosophers. Of course, that's not everyone. I'm not having a go at them. I'm just pointing out that often we lack this at college. And we need both of those together to stay in the game long enough so that we can learn Hermes, learn the dialectic, which may be tied to the art of the logos. That's our question. So we practice the virtues. Where's our snowman? This is our soul. We desire we desire the art of the logos. So now I'm using the art of the logos to talk about the things we desire. We desire dianoia, we desire nous or being, we desire phronesis, we desire truth, we desire to know the self. So all of those things I'm putting together as aspects of the art of the logos, loosely, as a hypothesis. Desire the art of the logos. So this is our outward moving part of the snowman. Let's make the snowman a bit bigger. Desire. Activity. Outward activity or outward honor seeking or outward moving. And we have our reasoning part of our soul. That's the smallest one. We have to desire what our reasoning wants. We have to do activities to do with learning. This makes you a lover of learning if you're arranged in this way. Socrates says if you're a lover of honor, that's the part of the soul that rules you. If you're a lover of riches, that part of the soul rules you. You start by being a lover of learning, and then you realize what you seek in learning actually is in nous, making you a philosopher. You upgrade from a philomethesis, lover of learning, to a philosophia, lover of wisdom. Wisdom is the logos directed towards being. So these are the virtues we put in through practice. Desiring the art of the logos. So we say, desiring the art of the logos. Temperance. Seeking the art of the logos and following what that says to be true in all of your activities. Courage. Reasoning about, learning about, philomethesis, learning about the art of the logos and using that in your reasoning and planning part of your soul. When you realize that's all the same thing, they all follow, all parts of the soul are unified towards the same function, gives you the virtue of justice. There's our 4 virtues. And this is a practice. Keep doing it. Encourage. That's why I do this. I try and do this podcast every day if I can. Keep coming back every day in everything. And why we have the Discord channel. And why we encourage each other to share our work. So that's the habit. So that would be an activity that we do. Okay, so maybe virtues go here. But those virtues then, when we have this experience, while developing the virtues, not a one-off at a rave or something, or just by silently meditating without developing the virtues, but if you have this nous experience, enlightenment experience, now we have that word under our belt from the text. If you have the enlightenment experience along with the virtues, this is what Socrates calls the initiation into phronesis. Phronesis is what we seek. So we seek truth of reality, and we also seek phronesis. So you've gone from a lover of learning, philomethesis, to a lover of wisdom. Wisdom is the virtue of this part. to a lover of phronesis, philophronesis. That's the virtue, that's the gold coin for which you trade in all of the other virtues. The one that doesn't lose its power, and therefore a learning that we can take with us wherever our soul goes. So Socrates is said to, as Phaedo said at the beginning, farewell and be with divine providence even in the afterlife. And that's what we want. That kind of thing. Something that will allow us to farewell a virtue that we can take with us even into the afterlife. So that comes from nous. So that's a power that adds to our activity, just like we do Apollo. We learn, we come back, we repeat, but then we realize, oh, hang on a second, I'm starting to have experiences. I'm starting to have insights. I'm starting to see the effect of philosophy on my life. So my activity of philosophy has been upgraded by this power of Aphrodite. Our virtues are upgraded by this power of nous. And what do we want to use our phronesis for? To seek the good. Because even the idea or the experience of good, because this has the self or the experience of good, the experience of justice, the experience of beauty. But then we ask the question, hang on a second, once we have these, what's the highest? Could we use this? Could we use our philosophy even out of the body? Socrates is saying, yes, collect yourself out of the body as much as you can, self by self, both now and in the future. To do what? Then he goes on to talk about how the more you're separated from the body, the more you can do philosophy. So if this learning that brought us into phronesis, we could then apply there to reach the good. How can we understand that? Well, let's bring in another triad. This is why we do triads. This is our skill tree. Because what's the highest excellence? The one self. And the self logos is the activity. Let's move that over a little bit. So we want to have all of them on the screen because they all fit together beautifully. So Apollo, another way of talking about Apollo is learning the self logos. And what do we reach when we reach nous? Self-being or mind. Or mind. And what's the highest excellence in our self-triad? The one self. So this is a level of enlightenment, nous, but not the final stage of enlightenment, of course. There are levels. And this level is the one self. Because even in that experience, there has to be someone having that experience. So self, self, self. Self goes all the way through. So we bring in this triad to understand this one. Because another word for oneself is the good self. The one or the good self. Therefore, this could be our ruling or the highest level of existence, being. So I would arrange it in this way. What do you think? How would you arrange it? And of course, we have its shadow. This can give it shadow of what were the terms that we got? Unenlightened, wicked, and vicious. So wicked is the word for vice. No, wait. Wicked was the opposite of bad. No, vicious was. Sorry. Actually, let's nail it down. Why not? So the word for wicked is here. You can copy that. So we see this mokthirian. Mokthirian means bad condition in a moral sense, wickedness or depravity. Okay, cool. So it's the opposite. So we might say vice. The opposite of virtue. The opposite of good is bad. He translates it as vicious, but we have the Greek, it says bad. And unenlightened, of course, is the opposite of nous. So let's add that to our triad. So we have wicked or vice. We have unenlightened. Which is a big word. And we have bad. This is the shadow. Interesting, because vice was defined as not an absence of the virtues, but many of the qualities of the virtues, but lacking the direction of the logos directed towards being. Now, we could maybe more unify that because, for example, mastering some of your desires to be mastered by the others is not virtue unless you master your desires to desire the art of the logos. So maybe we can say that which defines the vices is the lack of the art of the logos. Unenlightened, having not experienced nous, having not experienced being. Could the experience of being be necessary in the art of the logos? That's a question mark. And can you only reach the good through the art of the logos? So there's a question. Our question is what makes this triad different from this triad the art of the logos? Let's make that a question for us. Question. Is the difference between these triads the art of the logos? Now I'll move this guy away. Over there. Question mark. So it goes into our question sack. Is the difference between these triads the absence or the art of the logos? Let's keep reading. So notice we take some time to play, to create pictures. It doesn't have to be right, but we have to play. We have to arrange them in the diagrams, arrange them in the dialectic, pull out the key terms, develop questions, create hypotheses. That's playing the game. Hopefully a game that will lead us to become the greatest kind of hero and master the art of the logos. And if you're doing it, that's for you. So, the soul is said to possess nous, virtue, and the good. But on the other hand, another soul can be unenlightened, have vice, and be bad. Vicious is an interesting word. Are these statements made in a true way? So he's asking, hey, if you're using the art of logos to make your decisions and not just trusting me like you did before, you have to judge whether or not truth is here. Is it being made in a true way? So another question, what makes them true? How would you be able to judge whether or not these statements are true? That's a question. Certainly in a true way. Well, okay. Good for him. Of those who maintain that soul is harmony, what will someone say are these beings? Okay, now, if I was to predict, we wouldn't have the word being translated properly in the other text, but let's keep reading. Someone who maintains that the soul is harmony, what will someone say are these beings of virtue and vice, wickedness that exist in our souls? Are they in turn some other harmony and discord? And so the good soul is harmonious by being self-harmony. Interesting. Self-harmony. That's an interesting word. First time I've seen self-harmony. And also possess another harmony, whereas the other soul is discordant, is self-discordant. Interesting. And also possess no other harmony in itself. Okay, what's he saying here? Some other harmony and discord. The good soul is harmonious by being in self-harmony and also possess another harmony. Whereas the other soul is discordant and possess no other harmony. Okay, that's tricky. Let's try the other text. Says Socrates, one soul is said to possess sense, interesting, sense and not news, and virtue and to be good, and another to possess folly and wickedness and to be bad. Is this true? Yes, it's true. What will those who assume that the soul is harmony say that these things, not beings, things, the virtue and the wickedness in the soul are? What will they say it is? Because, of course, we talked about if you think the soul is harmony, you can't think all learning is remembering self-usia, being. So what will they say? And we have said, hey, look, the virtues are organizing your soul to seek being, follow being, plan according to being, reached and understood through the logos. So if there's no being for these guys who think the soul is harmony, what will they say is the difference between vice and virtue? This was a puzzle, right? He gave us one earlier. Vice and its shadow. Not vice and its opposite. And we talked about the man versus bear debate. The meme debate, would you, if you're a woman alone in the woods, would you rather run into a man or a bear? And women would rather choose the bear. And we used our understanding to understand this meme debate. Because a bear is in the physical world, moving between the physical kind of logos, opposites. Hungry, maybe he'll be hungry, maybe he'll be fed, maybe he'll be angry, maybe he won't. It's kind of a coin toss. Whereas a man has the ability to participate in the logos, in this way. Meaning it's not an opposite, it's the thing and its shadow. So remember, the vices are not a absence or an opposite. It's the shadow. There are some qualities of mastering some desires, holding on to some sort of courage, planning for yourself, involved in being wicked, involved in being a tyrant. The difference is what they desire is to fulfill their distorted idea of what they think is clear and true or good. If they think that sex is the most good thing, they might rape the woman. A bear won't think that way. Or power is the most good thing. That's the most real and clear and true thing. Because unless they're a lover of learning and then a lover of philosophy, they're nailing their soul to their physical senses. And Socrates talked about, what you can use to eat or drink or have sex with, those are the things that you think is most real and clear, and that's what you'll pursue and nurture your soul towards, affecting how you act in your reincarnations. So that's vice. A distorted allegiance to a distorted ignorance or false belief about what is true, good, real, and worth pursuing. In other words, lacking the logos directed towards truth, being, the real. It's a shadow of being, and its reasoning will justify that shadow. So it's the pathologos, the sick logos, to justify the sick idea of being, the sick idea of what it means to be wise, good, true, and so on. The shadow, like the mirror reflection of actual logos directed towards actual being. Bear ain't having that. Humans do. Which is why what we're saying is the art of the logos gives us what we need to recognize this. Humans don't have problems because of their nature. Not because people are bad or evil and need to be exterminated. That's what you come to if you don't have the logos. Socrates said that. Hey, if you realize we have these kinds of problems and you don't have the art of the logos to understand why, you're going to end up hating humans. And also hating the logos, which is the greatest defect. If you do have the art of the logos, you'll be able to recognize the cause of human problems. Simply the shadow of the true logos, directed towards true being. One is necessary to make the virtues virtues, the absence of which makes the vices vices. So, those who think that soul is harmony and there therefore isn't an apprehension of that being, what will they say makes the virtues virtues and the vices vices? Because we say what we just said. Logos and being. Perhaps the art of the logos. What will they say? Will they say this is another kind of harmony and a discord, and that the soul, which is itself a harmony, has another harmony? So the soul is a kind of harmony, that's the metaphor. Nature is harmony. In other words, it's the harmonized effect of your physical chemicals and your brain and your body and stuff. But there is another harmony that can either be harmony or discord, virtue and vices. And the other soul is discordant and has no other harmony within it. Oh, okay, so he's saying one soul is harmony and has within it another harmony to make it virtuous because it's a good person that can have virtue. Whereas the bad person who has vice is discordant and lacks that second harmony to make it virtuous. Kind of complicated. So I guess he's saying, hey, when you have one harmony, you'll naturally give rise to the second harmony. If you're a good soul, you'll give rise to virtue. If you're a bad soul, you're discordant. You've got a brain defect or something. So the harmony, the whole that results from the guitar that's out of tune because you've got a bump in your head makes you discordant, and therefore you can't reach that higher harmony of virtue, excellence. Interesting. I cannot tell, says Simius. I can't, yeah. But evidently, those who make that assumption would say something of that sort. They'll say something like that. Yeah, you're kind of... If your soul is harmonized well, then you can discover this greater harmony of virtue. But if you've got a brain defect, then you can't get that second harmony. Which is what... This is our world, isn't it? People who are sad or depressed or have problems. They're just sick in the brain. They need to take medicine. They got a brain defect. Right? This is a common belief. Which is what follows for materialists, people who don't think there's a realm of being and think we're just a byproduct if our consciousness... Hey, our state of mind is just a byproduct of our body, therefore if you're depressed, you've just got chemicals out of whack in your body. You're a discordant. Is that the sort of thing they would say? Absolutely. We see it even today. Isn't it amazing how far and how well Socrates can see? Let's get it in this text too. Right, we've already read that. Okay. I at least do not have anything to say, but it's clear that one who maintains that assumption might say something such as this. But we agreed before that one soul is neither more or less soul than another. But this is equal to agreeing that one harmony is neither full, not to any degree, nor less full, not to any degree, than another harmony. You're either harmony or you ain't. Let's see how he says it in the other text. But we agreed that one soul is no more or less a soul than another. And that is equivalent to an agreement that one is no more and to no greater extent, and to no less and no less extent, a harmony than another. If we're using harmony as a metaphor for the soul, then you're either a soul or you ain't. It is always going to be a harmony. You can't say you're more or less of a harmony if you can't say that if you know more or less of a soul. Certainly. And that which is no more or less a harmony is no more or less harmonized. Right? Yes. But that which is no more and no less harmonized, any greater or any less amount of harmony, or any equal amount. An equal amount. Let's read it again. Can anything which is neither more nor less harmonious or soul partake more or less of harmony or soul? So if we're all the same kind of soul, or we're all harmonious to be a soul, do some partake more or less of being a soul? Are you less of a soul because you got a problem? Or are we all an equal to an equal degree? An equal degree. Is it not the case then that if one soul is neither more nor less soul than another soul, she is soul to the same degree? So then she is neither more nor less harmonious. Okay, right? It is in this way. But if this is so, it would not have received more of a share of discord or of harmony. If you're either a soul or you ain't, then you wouldn't have shared more of soulness or harmony or of discord. It would not indeed. This being the case, in turn, could one soul have been affected any more by vice, or share of virtue any more than any other soul? If indeed, on the one hand, vice is discord and virtue is harmony. So we were right in pointing out vice. Is vice discord and virtue harmony? So we've seen that in our illustration over here. What justice is, which is, by the way, justice is in all of the other virtues. Desiring the art of the logos is doing the right thing for the soul. That's what justice is. Holding on to what is true from the art of the logos while you move in the world, that's courage. That's doing what's right at all times. That's justice. Using the art of the logos, or being understood through the logos for your reasoning, planning as the paradigm, is the right use of your thinking. So justice is in each of those, but also for you to be doing your intended function as a whole, you need all parts harmonized together. So you can say the virtue of justice is a harmony between all parts of the soul. That's virtue. You can say if this is in each of them and is the virtue of the whole, you could say, well, that's justice. Justice is kind of the virtue of all virtues, the defining virtue. And that's if you're desiring the art of the logos, if you're holding on to that with courage, if you're using it for reasoning, then all parts of your soul are harmonized together. 3 notes of the soul sing in a chord together in harmony. So if we're defining virtue as harmony, number 1, then if you think the soul is harmony, by definition, so we've got let's write that down. Move down a little bit. I'll put it here. So if, therefore, virtue is harmony of the parts of the soul together, doing their intended function, doing their intended function in their own way, but with the same goal, singing the same note. But if the soul is harmony, by definition, because we're a materialist, and we think, oh, well, there is no realm of being, our soul, therefore, is a byproduct of the physical world, a material world. Then how will we explain the difference between virtue versus vice? Because if the soul is harmony itself, you can't say it's any more or less harmonized. Because you don't have, my soul is no more or less soul than your soul. And if we're defining soul as harmony, then we can't say we're more or less soul. Therefore, we can't say we're more or less harmony. Therefore, you can't say you're more or less harmonized within yourself. Therefore, you can't say you're more or less virtue versus vice. If vice is disharmony within the soul, you seek this, but your reason says this. Your honor seeks that. It's vice. Therefore, somebody who is a materialist and thinks that we don't have a soul, it's just a byproduct or a harmony of our body, how do you explain the difference between virtue and vice? That's the question on the table. Good question, Sock. So, could one soul have been affected any more by vice or a share of virtue any more than another soul, if indeed vice is discord and virtue is harmony? Why no more? But it is certainly much more so, O Simius, that according to the correct logos, what's the correct logos? Sting. Soul would in no way share of any vice if she were indeed harmony. So we're correcting the thinking of people who are materialists. So that's kind of artful, isn't it? Healing like a doctor. Only our realm is the logos. If the soul were indeed harmony, she would in no way share of any vice. Hey, there is no good or bad. People are just people. Know me, know my ways. There ain't no virtue or vice. It's all just whatever. For it is beyond a doubt that if harmony is entirely harmony, then to the same degree, it would never share of discord. So this is its nature. If harmony is entirely harmony, the soul, then it can't be discord. Right? If you were saying, equal, I'm defining this thing as equal, could it ever be unequal? No, not by, it's defined as being equal. It can't be unequal. If you're defining soul as being harmony, it can't be discord. Therefore, if vice is discord, you can't have a bad soul. There are no bad souls. Hey, this tyrant, Trump is no more or less virtuous than anyone else. So yeah, he could be president, why not? Right? He's one of the two choices that people are told they can pick from. Now, of course, you pick a country, there'll be someone like that. Hey, there's no vice. I'm not bad because I'm seeking my pleasures or seeking fame or lying and contradicting myself or manipulating people. There's no vice. Isn't that kind of that culture that we're in now? What about yourself? When you think about practicing the virtues and pursuing the logos, desiring it, holding on to it with courage, using it for your reasoning, do you think there's better things to do? Philosophy is a one-off thing. It's a fun thing for kids to do in college. But I'm like one of those angry boomers who say, yeah, you want to do philosophy? You're going to get a job at McDonald's. Because there's no difference in vice and virtue. There's no more or less harmonious soul. Just do whatever. Right? That's a common belief that we suffer from in our culture today. But also within us. So we have to understand and purify ourselves from. And we have a choice. What do we want to desire today? What do we want to do today? What should we reason with today? The art of the logos? Read the Phaedo together? Walk the walk, talk the talk? Or, there's no difference. Because we're all souls. Or maybe you're from a culture like mine that says, in Australia, it's rude to judge. How dare you say one soul is better than... I'm no better. You say you're better than me? You think you're better than me? I will punch you in the face. How dare you? Or you say your mother is better than my mother. My mother was a saint. Punch. It's rude or arrogant. How dare you say one soul can be better than another? Surely that's wrong. Screw you. So, you feel it's wrong or bad or rude or arrogant to suggest that there is a virtue. A soul can be more harmonized than another soul and therefore more good, enlightened, virtuous, just doing its right thing. So these are things that we have to recognize echoing within the cave of our own mind. So Plato's cave, they talk about reflections off the wall of the cave, reflecting the voices of our past, people who we believed to be, as Socrates says, usually near and dear, and we believed them to be good and trustworthy, but they're not. It's a byproduct of being human, being raised, and a byproduct of our evolution to believe it. But those voices we have to recognize. Oh, there is such a thing as harmony. There is such a thing as good and enlightened and virtue. And one way of purifying ourselves from those sick, vice, wicked, vicious words, sayings, is to understand them. That's what we do. We don't attack them or blame them. We understand them. If you understand them, you'll see it has a cause. It has a nature. It's not true. Thumbs up. Understanding. So part of our art of the logos, if it's healing or purifying, might be through understanding. Well, I mean, quite obviously it is. It has logos in the title. So this is what we use ourselves. And how do we do it? We apply the correct logos, according to the correct logos. So that's what we do. That's how we address this ignorance. What's the correct logos? Well, if harmony is harmony, then it can't be discord. So if our soul is harmony, there's no difference between virtue and vice, because vice is discord and virtue is harmony. So hey, there's no way of judging Trump. And when this was recorded, there was recently a debate between Trump and the other guy, Joe Biden.
Flibbity jibbity nonsense.
And the debaters were freaking terrible. They asked questions and one rambled incoherently and the other just lied and acted in a vicious vice way. And there was no, hey, do you know that that's not virtue? Or do you think it's good for a leader to not know virtue or to be acting in vice? Do you think there's no difference between virtue and vice? If you do think there's a difference, why are you choosing vice? What would it be like if we had a doctor acting in a vice way? Do you think the ruler of the country should be worse than a doctor? Or should he recognize what is a harmony of a soul and how to enact it within a population? Is that part of the art of ruling? None of these questions. It was garbage. This is the logos of Simius, that Socrates says he must jump to the aid of the logos and vanquish the logos of Simius. The logos that is prevalent right now and is a huge cause of the problems we suffer in the world and within ourselves when we have a choice to be a philosopher, to be virtuous, to free ourselves from our chains and reach our excellence. Very, very relevant. Beyond a doubt that if soul were entirely soul, she would never share in vice. Beyond a doubt, says Socrates. Simius replies, how could it not be in this way, in view of what has been said? So not only is it without a doubt, Simius is saying, and the opposite can't be true. So he's going beyond belief and trust, which could cause the problems that he actually had himself. He was thrown into disarray when this logos came up, the one that's prevalent even now. He's saying it can't be not in that way. Can't be not in a way. How could it not be in this way, in view of what's been said? Accordingly then, says Socrates, it follows from this logos that all the souls in all of us living beings will be similarly good and to the same degree, if indeed souls are similarly produced. Right? Ain't no difference between any of us. Tyrant is as good as a philosopher. To me, at least, it appears to be so, Socrates. If the hypothesis that the soul is harmony was correct, does it still appear to be beautifully said? And would its logos also undergo in this way, by these conditions? In no way whatsoever. Okay, let's read it in different text because that's a bit weird. This one here. Since it is no more or less a soul than another, is no more or less harmonized, right? Right. And therefore can have no greater amount of discord or of harmony, right? Right. And therefore, again, one soul can have no greater amount of wickedness or virtue than another, if wickedness is discord and virtue harmony. Vice is discord, virtue harmony cannot. Or rather, to speak exactly, Simmias, no soul will have any vice at all, if the soul is a harmony. For if a harmony is entirely harmony, it could have no part in discord. If hot is hot, it would have no part of cold, because it's hot by definition. Then a soul being entirely soul, could have no part of wickedness or vice. How could it, if what we said is right? According to this argument then, if all souls are by nature equally souls, all souls of all living creatures will be equally good. Philosopher will be no more or less good than a goat, or a tyrant, or a thief, or Donald Trump. So it seems, Socrates. And, says Socrates, do you think that this is true, and our reasoning would have come to an end, if the theory that the soul is a harmony were correct? You think this is true, and our reasoning will come to an end? Not in the least. What does he mean by that? Do you think that this is true, and our reasoning would have come to an end? Right, so if the theory of harmony were correct, we couldn't settle on this conclusion. This conclusion follows there is no good or bad, virtue or vice. There is no difference in souls and how they function, how they're arranged and therefore function. But would we be happy with this? No. We'd have to understand it differently. No, we wouldn't be happy with this. Well, says Socrates, of all the parts that make up a man, do you think any is ruler except the soul? Especially if it be a wise one? So there's something of a man that is ruled. You've got a body and you've got a soul. Which rules which? Well, you can have bestial people, I suppose, that let their bodily instincts take over. But if you're wise, the soul rules, of course. Does it yield to the feelings of the body or oppose them? I mean, when the body is hot and thirsty, does not the soul oppose it and draw it away from drinking and from eating when it is hungry? And do we not see the soul opposing the body in countless other ways? Right? Sometimes when you're hungry, your soul says, don't eat right now, eat later. I guess. Or if you're on a diet, maybe. Did we not agree in our previous discussion that it could never, if it be harmony, give forth a sound at variance with the tensions and relaxations and vibrations and other conditions of the elements which compose it, but that it would follow them and never lead them? Wow, if our soul is merely a byproduct of our body, a harmony created from the tensions and vibrations of our body, then every time you're hungry, your soul would just say, eat. You'd be a slave to your bodily senses and desires and impulses and urges. There would not be a rule. Your soul couldn't rule it. It would be a slave to it. Yes, we did agree to that. Well then, do we not now find that a soul acts in exactly the opposite way, leading those elements of which it is said to consist and opposing them in almost everything throughout our life, and tyrannizing over them in every way, sometimes inflicting harsh and painful punishments? Those of gymnastics and medicine. Medicine, okay, I'm guessing the word isn't punishments, but sometimes medicine is something harsh, but is needed to heal you. And gymnastics, going from health to excellence. Sometimes it's hard and painful to go to the gym or to undergo medical treatment, go to a dentist. And sometimes milder ones, sometimes threatening, sometimes admonishing. In short, speaking to the desires and passions and fears as if it were distinct from them and they from it. So it's not the same as the desires and passions and fears, so that it can tell it, hey, take this medicine, hey, go to the gym. Sometimes in a milder way, hey, come on man, don't eat all the cake. You don't want to become too much of a fatty. As if the soul that thinks is different from the body and its fears and passions and desires. As Homer has shown in the Odyssey when he says of Odysseus, he smote his breast, and thus he chid his heart. What the hell is a chide? Endure it, heart. You have borne worse than this. Like, you've dealt with worse. You can endure it. Do you suppose that when he wrote those words, he thought of the soul as a harmony which will be led by the conditions of the body, and not rather as something fitted to lead and rule them, and itself a far more divine thing than harmony? By Zeus, Socrates, the later, I think. Then, my good friend, it will never do for us to say that the soul is a harmony, for we should, it seems, agree neither with Homer, the divine poet, nor with ourselves. Okay, so the divine poet Homer referenced this, so he's referring to Homer the same way we might refer to Socrates, and referring to their own use of the dialectic, their own use of the art of the logos maybe. They have seen it for themselves. So we would have this argument with ourselves, this reasoning with ourselves, this dialectic with ourselves and with our friends, and we would conclude, therefore, our soul is not just a byproduct of our physical body. And by the way, Socrates said so too. So if we thought that we were like harmony, a byproduct, and not an immortal thing that once knew being and has the potential to return to being if we do our work here, and if we thought that we weren't that, if we weren't immortal and of the nature of being and to return, have a purpose to return to it in this life and the next, then we would be disagreeing with our own reasoning through the art of the logos, and we'd be disagreeing with old Socrates, our great friend. And Homer. We can add Homer there too, why not? That is true, said Simmias. Very well, said Socrates. Harmonia, the Theban goddess, has, it seems, been moderately gracious to us. But how, Cebes, and by what arguments can we find grace in the sight of Cadmus? What the heck? Harmonia, okay, so I'm guessing that's to do with the goddess representing harmony, has been gracious to us. So I guess there's a bit of a pun here. They have harmonized themselves in a virtuous way through the art of the logos and this conversation by seeing that the soul is not harmony. But also referring to the idea that there is a divine harmony. Harmony in terms, not the soul, but in terms of virtue and justice. Justice exists in being, self-justice. So we can represent the excellence of justice by a goddess, because mythology, as we've been seeing, is a mythological representation or a character representation or a narrative representation of the actual philosophical principles we want to remember and communicate in a fun way and have fun with. So Harmonia, the Theban goddess of harmony, justice and virtue, has been gracious to us. There has been virtue in their conversation. But how and by what argument can we find grace in the sight of Cadmus? Who's Cadmus? I have no idea who Cadmus is.
Wow. Wow.
What? What? What?
I think, said Cebes, you will find a way. Who's Cadmus? And at any rate, you conducted this argument against harmony wonderfully and better than I expected. For when Simmias was telling of his difficulty, I wondered if anyone could make head against his argument. So it seemed to me very remarkable that it could not withstand the first attack of your argument. Good for him. Now I should not be surprised if the argument of Cadmus met with the same fate. Right, so I'm guessing Cadmus is probably Simmias's idea of you don't outlive your last jacket. If the body is like a coat, sure, your soul is more powerful than a coat. You outlive many coats in your lifetime, but not the last one. Or even if there's reincarnation, maybe this is your last incarnation. Maybe your incarnations wear your soul down and eventually you don't know whether this is your last reincarnation. Just like you don't know whether this is your last physical form if you're going to die. My friend, said Socrates, do not be boastful. Let some evil eye put us to rout the argument that is to come. Don't jinx us. That, however, is in the hands of God. So he's like really praising Socrates. And, hey, you did a good job. You didn't. This argument against harmony that you made, it couldn't even stand up to the first attack. You're awesome. And, hey, don't jinx us. This is in the hand of gods. Right? Socrates always says that. It's not me, it's the logos. Let us, in Homeric fashion, charge the foe and test the worth of what you say. Now he's going to go on to the next argument. So, what do you think? Have we properly vanquished the art, the materialism, or the emergentism argument that we don't have a soul, our consciousness is merely a byproduct of the body? A lot of atheists like that argument. Has Socrates come to our aid? Let's read that last bit in the Balboa translation to see if there are any bits that we might miss by reading the other one. I think it's pretty cut and dry, but let's try it anyway. So, if the hypothesis that the soul is harmony is correct, does it still appear to be beautifully said? Good thing we took a stop. Beautifully said. So our question is, what should change? One of our questions, one of our many, is what should change our mind? How do we know whether or not an argument is true or not? And how do we change our minds well and not be stubborn or arrogant in a negative sense? How do we not be closed-minded, brainwashed? Beautiful is one of the metrics. Was it beautifully said? And would its logos also feel in this way by the conclusions? So the logos can feel it. That's interesting. What was the other one? Other one was, do you think it's true and our reasoning would come to an end? Is that it? Now, if the theory that soul is harmony was correct, do you think that it is true and our reasoning will come to an end? 94B. Yeah. Wow, our past translation missed a lot. Again, highlighting that we have what we need to awaken philosophy now. Beautifully said, and it's logos. The logos. See, the word logos is right there. Would feel in this way about these conclusions. Interesting. One of our questions is, what would it feel like to be enlightened? What would it feel like to experience self-usia? And one of those things that we have pointed out exists in being is the logos, allowing us to have this conversation. You never see a logos, but we use it all the time if we have the virtues. So what would the logos feel if we were the logos? So beauty and logos, two aspects of being, or two ideas, not forms, two ideas being used to judge the conclusion. Nope, not correct. What then? Out of all living beings you can mention up until the present time, has there been a certain one other than soul that governs human beings? Especially if she is also mindful. There's our phronesis word. Yay.
Wow.
Good thing we jumped over to this text, because this is what we're after. This is a big question. This is the big goal of philosophy. Philophronesis. So, part of our question, what the heck is phronesis, is being governed by the soul. Wow. Add that to our...
Come on, man!
Add that to our list of ideas tied with phronesis for our own dialectics that I hope you're working on your own. And what was the mistranslation? Just so we know, because, as we do a dialectic, what it is, what it isn't. Also, as we read the text, what is the text and what are we dealing with? Where is our society up until now? What makes us unique and different? They didn't have the word phronesis, so they missed the biggest puzzle of the text, the whole goal of the text. There are lots of puzzles woven through it, but when you go to a Christopher Nolan movie, there are lots of puzzles, but there's the main puzzle that every idiot can see, and we've missed that in our text. This is the main one. We're after truth and phronesis. It's like the main quest of the story, and even that is missing in the past translations, which is curious. So, what did they say? What are we up to? Especially if a wise one. Okay, wisdom. Now this is huge. Do you think the ruler is anyone except the soul, especially if it be a wise one? And why is this huge? Well, the whole thing of phronesis is it's literally different from wisdom. Of the four virtues, the one that changes in the spiritual initiation to the divine virtue, the one for which we develop the virtues, is wisdom. That's the one that changes. Remember, sound-mindedness, virility, the adjective of courage, being the focus of wisdom, and justice doesn't change, virility doesn't change, sound-mindedness doesn't change, phronesis is there. So literally, the thing that it isn't is there. It's the opposite Our past translations had the opposite word. Well, not opposite, kind of opposite. Because it's literally the virtue that gets traded in. Isn't that interesting? Socrates teaching what he wants to leave us behind, the opposite of a bee sting, the best thing. We miss up until now. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that puzzling and curious? Isn't it wonderful that we can play the game? And isn't it puzzling that we are dealing with the opposite in past translations? Even people who studied philosophy with integrity, without this modern translation, this new recent translation, which has the actual Greek, we miss the big thing. It's like Harry Potter never goes to Hogwarts. Wisdom never becomes Phronesis. Like, that's the whole movie. He has to go to Hogwarts to become a wizard. Right? Isn't that wonderful? What do you say, Owen?
Wow. 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 Wow.
I agree with his whole family. All right, so just keep reading. So, and by the way, for us, interesting to know where we're at in society and why what we're doing is so great and new. But also for us, we want to learn what phronesis is. So being ruled by the soul is part of it. Governed. So does she do so by embracing the affections of the body or opposing them? Thus, I mean by this, such as when the body is hot and thirsty, the soul draws it to the opposite condition, to not drinking. And when the body is hungry, to not eating. And we certainly see countless other ways of the soul opposing the affections of the body, or is this not the case? Okay, now, of course, sometimes when you're hot and thirsty, you drink, but there are times when you are hot and thirsty and you don't. I guess when you've drunk too much, or when you're in the middle of something else, you're in the middle of a sports game and you're thirsty, but you wait till half time. I don't know. Eating is easier to say, you're still hungry, but you've already eaten a lot. Right, so here we are. We have to so I took a bit of a pause, and the question is, okay, so the soul that rules us, especially those who have phronesis, sometimes draws us opposite to what our body is wanting. Sometimes it wants to eat more and we say, no, that's enough food for you, fatty. Or we're thirsty and we might not drink. But if it was, as we previously agreed, that the soul was, or the self was indeed harmony, then she could in no way whatsoever sing opposite to the sounds caused by the tightening, loosening and strumming and those other experiences of which she happens to be feeling, since she must follow them and can never lead them. If you think that the soul is a byproduct of your body, then your soul would always be doing what your body wants. You couldn't say, hey, don't eat the food or don't drink the water if you're thirsty. Just like the harmony on a guitar is always going to follow how tense the string is, or how loose it is, or how you strum it physically. We did so agree, how could we not have? Socrates continues, what now? Does she appear to be acting in quite the opposite way when she rules over those affections, of which self has been composed? And so by opposing nearly all but a few throughout all of life, and by mastering all of their ways, and on the one hand, at times, she corrects more harshly with the suffering that accompanies physical training and medical treatments. Like, your body doesn't want to go to the gym, the body doesn't want to go to the dentist, but your soul is harsh. It's like, nope, this is good for you, do it. But then at times she corrects more gently, and then she just uses threats. Like, if you don't put down that last piece of cake, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow for an extra hour. So gently. Other times she advises by having a dialectical. Interesting. The first time we have seen in this whole text the word dialectic. It has been implied the whole time. We have been carrying a hypothesis that this collecting self by self together out of the body is something to do with the dialectic because of the expression self by self. The paradigm, the skill, the rules of the art we've been hypothesizing is a dialectic. This is the first time he's dropped the word in the text itself. That's a big deal. Okay, that's sometimes a way that he does it. In some of the other texts, there's a certain key word that is the solution to the whole thing that's dropped once. As a good movie would do. If there's a hidden question that a careful reader or watcher is looking for, sometimes the answer will be given once. And that will be a contrast. The main theme will be repeated many times, and there'll be many clues to solve the main story of the movie, but the hidden question, the real one, the fact that it's only mentioned once makes it stand out as significant. I'm not saying that's the case here, but it is curious that we're 60% of the way through, and it's the first time he's dropped the big D word. He's given us the big D. Dialectic. So sometimes we have by the way, this whole thing about there being a key term dropped once as a significant way of solving the real puzzle isn't in all past translations. That's why this new translation is so significant. That's why we have what we need now to awaken philosophy. Because, bring it up. Sometimes threatening, sometimes admonishing. In short, speaking to the desires. Speaking. We literally didn't have that word. So how can we solve the puzzle if the answer isn't given? It's like one of those infuriating puzzles that you might hear as a kid, like, Jimmy went into a field and died. Why? How can I solve that puzzle? That's nonsense. You have to give me some clue in the question for the answer. He went into a field and died. Why? Because there was a bull in the field that... No. Because he went into the field because he fell out of an airplane and he died on impact? No. I don't know why. Because Jimmy was an ice block. What the heck? I hate those puzzles. Kids often use them. They think they're brain teasers. You have to they're silly because there's nothing in the question itself that is a clue to the answer specifically. So if we don't have the word dialectic given up until now, because we only now have the Balboa translation in the last 5 years, and the Balboa translation not only translated the word dialectic, put it in a different color, put it with a capital letter, and had the Greek underneath it. We can solve the puzzle. And the puzzle, Socrates is saying, is the most important puzzle to solve. Not solving it leads to all human problems, and to the greatest defects of your soul, and will affect your reincarnation. You come back as a bee, or talking about bulls, you come back as a bull or a donkey, or a wolf or a hawk or an ant. But not evolve up into the higher levels of reality, with better men who've completed their work here, better gods and masters, and daemons, who are maybe having a dialectical conversation up there. More importance. So it's the greatest puzzle to solve. and with the greatest stakes for our soul and humanity itself. We have, as we've been saying, we've got the technology for nuclear weapons. We can play out our ignorance, all of the things that follow not being a philosopher, or what if philosophy isn't. Philodoxia, lover of opinions, philosomatos, lover of the body, and philonikos, lover of contention. These are what we have if we don't have philomathesis, lover of learning, into a lover of philosophy, philosophia, into a lover of phronesis, philophronesis. Those are the three positives and negatives. So the greatest puzzle with the greatest stakes. So for whatever reason, if you're here, you have been born into quite a fascinating point of history. We have what we need to play out the implications of our lack of philosophy, if philosophy isn't side B of your dialectic. We have what we need to play out those the implications of that, the division stage of that, with disastrous species ending consequences, planet destroying consequences. There are many species have gone extinct. Humans could be one of them. But there is a important reason for humanity, a destiny that we each have, but humanity also has within a greater whole, a significance to the human species. Meaning at this point of history, not only can we play out the tragic implications of not having philosophy, we literally have this text from Balboa so that we can have what we need to solve those problems. Not just purify that negative, but to reach a happier, more harmonious, more excellent, more virtuous, more just, more evolved state of being. We can be better. Now, he mentions two things: physical training and medical treatments. Why? For this reason. He's passing on this art of the logos in this particular way, through this kind of puzzles, through key terms that we can only have now, so that we can do medical treatment. What's the analogy of medical treatment? Purifying our problems, ending the genocides, the wars, the division, the discord, ending the possible extinction of humanity and the planet. And what's the other part of the game? Not just going from sickness to health through medical treatments, but going from health to excellence through physical training. Physical training, like once you're not sick anymore, you don't have the ideal of the body. Just like once we've ended the human sickness by applying the art of the logos, we're not the ideal, we're not utopian yet. The art of the logos does that as well. These are the stakes. This is the importance of this story. So what Socrates is calling literally his swan song. He literally called it, we didn't call it swan song, he referred to swans' songs. The meaning for that phrase, one swan song, the greatest achievement right before their birth, right before their retirement or death. As a swan sings their most beautiful song right before they're passing away, because they know where they're going and it's going to be good, and they know it's good. They recall it. So, dialectic, right after these two things, medical treatments and physical training. Coincidence? No. Key terms? Yes. Placed in a puzzling way? Yes. In a structure, in the same paragraph that might speak to something significant? Yes. Contrasting with the other elements, and that it's mentioned once? Yes. This is the Sherlock Holmes cap that we wear as a philosopher. This is reading. This is the video game. This is the ideal video game. We're leveling up, we're solving problems, we're discovering things within the haunted mansion of the video game, except it's within the text. And the stakes are real. Secondarily for others, for humanity, but primarily for us. Greedy. Socrates says, I'm greedy. The word selfish doesn't work because selfish indicates bad, and it's Socrates. He's not doing anything bad. That's why we have to get rid of selfish. That's bollocks. Greedy though. He wants it for himself. But he knows that as a secondary effect, it will benefit others by naturally being beautiful and persuasive. So it actually helps others too. So that's why selfish and selfless doesn't work. By being greedy for the self, you are actually helping in the greatest way. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that cool? Doesn't that harmonize ourselves? That we're not in discord with your own goals and your own needs and helping others, and somehow it's good to sacrifice your shit so you can help others, sacrifice your life for the king, all that bollocks. Isn't that in fundamental discord? Isn't that slavery? Isn't that terrible? But the capitalists say, oh, it's good to be a company man. But then you realize, well, I'm just sacrificing my life for the personal wealth of shareholders. That doesn't sound good. Oh, but it's selfless. So selfish and selfless is a kind of language that mimics the competitive nature of the physical world. It lacks the logos, it lacks being, it lacks the techne and art. Where everyone benefits by everyone benefiting. The true good. The next level of evolution. So the translation selfish doesn't work. Greedy maybe, but in the best way. Socrates says all physical things seek being, but also help others by reminding them. You see two sticks and you start to ask the question, what is equal itself? You see a beautiful person, what is beauty itself? You wouldn't ask that question if you didn't see a beautiful thing. So both for yourself and to help others, the better you can reach being, the better you're doing both. It's not a dichotomy. So back to the bear and the man. Well, yeah, a bear is playing out the opposites, and a man has the potential for villainy, but he also has the potential for the greatness. Helping everyone, himself and everyone at the same time. So long as you are seeking the logos of being and you're applying that to the virtues. This is a kind of harmony within ourselves, but also selfish and selfless, helping yourself, helping others, harmonizing, helping yourself and helping others. And in this argument, we're defining virtue as a kind of harmony. The soul can't be the harmony, because then there would be no villainous people. Everyone would be equally virtuous. That doesn't make sense. That's this whole conversation. But true virtue that we only get in this game, that we can only do now, harmonizes all people together. Harmonizes you reaching your highest goal and also having a secondary effect to help others in the highest way. It's not competitive. Everyone wins by everyone winning. That's the new stage of physical training for the soul and for humanity. So physical training and medical treatments, of course, are an analogy pointing to our soul and secondarily humanity. Healing our problems, the art of the logos, reaching that excellence of harmony. Physical training. Through what? Maybe dialectic, but definitely the art of the logos. So if you're here, good for you. You're in the best possible game at the best possible time. So, the soul isn't just a byproduct of our body, because sometimes she corrects it through harsh medical treatments or physical training, sometimes more gently, sometimes through dialectic conversation with desires, angers, fears, as if she were one resource talking to another. As if she was having a conversation. Hey, come on, you don't really want that piece of pie. You're just eating because you're sad. And if you eat all the pie, you're going to be more sad because you're going to look at yourself in the mirror tomorrow and call yourself a fatty. So come on, wouldn't it be better if we just reflected on the cause of this problem that you're having and not drown yourself in pie? That kind of conversation. And of course, the better we learn the dialectic, the better we'll be able to have that relationship with our physical body. Reasoned, friendly, encouraging, uplifting, win-win. addressing causes. What's the real cause of you wanting to eat all of the pie? And by the way, it's understandable. You can solve the problem. You don't live in a bad reality that's based only on opinions. So there is an understanding. And there is a skillful use of that balloons. Techne, art. There is an art. Those three things that we're told we don't have. An actual reality called being, an actual understandability called the logos, an actual skillful or artful use, which might be the dialectic.
Wow.
So the better we can do that, the better we can rule ourselves. Just as Homer wrote in the Odyssey, when he wrote of Odysseus, thus he struck his breast, correcting his heart by advising, endure it, my heart, for you have endured other things far worse at other times. Right? Encouraging himself. Yeah, you get it. Accordingly then, do you think that when the poet wrote this, he understood self as being a harmony, which is also led by the affections of the body, like the harmony of your guitar is led by the tension of the string, and not rather as leading and mastering them? So leading, of course, is key, but also mastering. All the way through, Socrates talks about we are here under the rule and mastership of someone. That's why we can't commit suicide to go to that next place. We have to wait for someone else to do the good deed. Like you wouldn't want your Roomba to off itself because it belongs to you. But also there being greater masters in that next life. So mastership has been a theme all the way through. Since the self being according to self, there we go, self according to self, the first category of the dialectic, she is also much more divine resource than harmony. So here's a conclusion. So, is the soul or the self like a harmony? Of course, the word is another puzzle we've talked about. The word is self, so it has three meanings. So we talked about the three rejections that cause our problems. There's no reality, there's no logos, there's no art. Here there's another three. The word self means the particular, the honorific, and the ultimate. So you can understand self. What's the particular of this conversation? What's the it? Understood it as being a harmony. It, soul. Understood soul as being a harmony. That works. That will always work. But one way of reading it that unlocks the puzzles, honorific. Do you understand the ideal soul to be a harmony? The hyparxis, self-ousia, led by the affections of the body. This ties it back into the argument of learning. He's saying you can't have both. You can't think that the soul is harmony and all learning is remembering, because what we're remembering is self-ousia that we must have experienced before we were born, before we had the strings and the wood, before we had the body. You can't have both. So by seeing the word self has that second meaning, it adds a higher level of harmony to our reading. It unlocks a deeper question that we would only get if we had the word self there, that hasn't been translated until now. Again, highlighting what we've been talking about. But there's the third reading, ultimate, the one self, that for which we do everything. Know thyself, the whole reason why we learn the dialectic to reach being. Unlike Taoists who reach being through meditation or only, we have the dialectic and the logos and the art of the logos in our back pocket, that even in outside of the body we can do philosophy. Why? Surely reaching reality is the end? Nope. Separating yourself from the body, getting used to it, maintaining it, collecting yourself together, self according to self, both now and the future. Socrates has been talking about there's something to do when you reach being, when you leave the body. Okay? So apply that. If you understand the self as being harmony led by the body. Oh. So the self is not a whole of parts. Just as the soul is not a harmony of the body. Just as self-ousia, the one soul, is not a byproduct of many souls, but the hyparxis of being. Wow.
Wow.
All this information is there, so long as we match Socrates. And the text translation matches Socrates. So that's what we're doing. So, the soul must be a much more divine resource than harmony because it leads and masters the parts. Yes, by Zeus, it appears to me at least. To me at least, it appears so, O Socrates. Take notice then, my noble friend, we can no longer maintain in a beautiful way, so this is our standard again, that soul is harmony. For as it is reasonable, we would neither agree with the divine poet Homer, nor selves with ourselves. Again, self in relation to self. So if we thought that our soul was a byproduct of a body, we would not agree with ourselves if we went through this argument as we've done today. So good for us. We wouldn't be agreeing with Homer or Socrates or Simmias. So we'd be against all of these people who are our friends. It has to be in this way. Okay? So then he goes into he represents this argument mythologically. He said he would do that. So he's taken this argument about harmony and related it to the Theban goddess Harmonia. And he's going to relate Sebe's argument to the god Cadmus. So we've seen together the importance of this, the stakes of this, and how we can do it, and how we are doing it. We are matching him, allowing us to reach this level of heroicness that it could be the ideal of the hero that we can only do now, and allowing Socrates to do what he wanted to do, pass it on. What do you think? Was this argument about that we can call Harmonia, the Theban goddess, represented mythologically? Was it convincing? Was there some significance in you going through it yourself, rather than just believing what someone told you? Can you see a difference between this kind of reasoning that might have a beautifulness and a necessity and a reasonableness compared to what is probable in science? It's probably that we're a byproduct of our chemistry. That's a scientific theory based on scientific stuff that we can touch and put in a sea and put in a test tube. Or what's familiar and attractive, whatever you grew up with. Or whatever the culture is saying. Like our culture in Australia. It's rude to say one soul is more virtuous than another. That's arrogant. Therefore being terrible is just as good. So in our culture, we have a weird game where you kind of use swear words to affectionately, or you act in a gross way as though it's virtuous. Because you're saying, look at me, I am agreeing to the rules not to judge virtue and vice, so much so that I'm going to act in the most vice way as though it's virtue to my friends. I'm going to use the worst language, I'm going to be grotesque, I'm going to dress disgusting, as a way of signifying I'm one of the clan. I've agreed not to judge souls as being good or bad, more or less harmonious, as a way of rejecting our purpose here in order to be slaves to the king and queen. I've accepted what we're told is good, which is to be ignorant and stupid, and not to judge. It's called tall poppy syndrome as well. So you can make sense of your culture that you're in with the art of the logos. But you don't want that to be attractive to you just because it's familiar. Just like you don't want the idea that the soul, being like harmony, a byproduct of our physical squirtings in our brain, to be convincing because it's probable based on geometry and science. So what do you think? Was this argument more convincing, beautiful? Do you see the stakes in this? Do you find it exciting that we can play this game now? That Socrates' vision and goal is only now coming to light? Isn't it cool that he was seeing more than 2,000 years into the future? Describing our world right now. Laying forth something that can only be awakened now. Isn't that cool? Isn't it exciting for you as a person, as a soul, to have that potential? And we've still got one more argument to go, at least. That we need to vanquish, and also while vanquishing it, figure out how it's being vanquished so we can learn the art of the logos and reach that level of harmony, virtue, and heroicness ourselves. Something to look forward to. On that cliffhanger and on that bombshell, I hope to see you next time. Thank you for joining me. And of course, feel free to join on Twitch and join on Discord if you want to get notifications when we're streaming live on Twitch. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And hopefully soon we'll have a Patreon. If you have the means and the interest in supporting this channel in any way, feel free to contribute on Patreon. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me in chat. I was really happy with your thoughts and what you shared, and I'll check out those links too. I'm glad that you found it inspiring as well. Yes, and thank Plato. Yes, and thank you, Socrates. And thank you, Parmenides, for passing this on to Socrates. And Xenophanes for passing it on to Parmenides. And I think that's as far as we know. I think Xenophanes is the guy. But yeah. So thank you, everyone. Hope to see you next time.